that started this company, and it revolves around bulletproofing, essentially. So there's going to be a lot more detail to come out. But there's two individuals we're talking to in New Jersey. Again, they're former military. They went overseas. They did quite a bit of tours overseas, and their product is to help bulletproof certain areas of a school, right? So when it comes to that, again, we all say, hey, it's not going to happen here until it does, right? And we need to make sure that school safety comes it is and remains as a priority. And going into that, I think that we'll have more details coming out, I think, in the next 2-3 weeks. We're meeting with them. So we're going to do a separate press conference on that, actually, where we have the CEO of the company, his partner. We're also going to have, I believe, Curtis Lewa join us as well, a few other individuals that are kind of invested into this. And that's going to be part of that plan. Then lastly, I know we're working on another initiative when it comes to quality of life issues down by, in the 90s by Shore Road in Bay Ridge. There's been complaints of noise, right, coming from the parkway and the belt. So I'm actually proposing an infrastructure proposal with basically to create sound barriers on around that wall, so that basically, because everything echoes down around there, right? So we're proposing sound barriers from that side over from like the 90s to the lower 70s. Quality of life from a noise perspective will certainly improve. We're already starting a petition right now. We have about 350 signatures going right now, and we'll have more shortly. So, and that's a second proposal, again, specific to quality of life. But at the end of the day, we have to continue to fight. There's no other way. And we have to make sure that our patriotism is intact. We can't afford to lose hope in our country, lose hope in our state, lose hope in our city because of what's going on. And frankly, yes, we're in a very dire situation right now. There's no doubt about that, but it's individuals like myself and everyone in this room is the reason why we'll have an opportunity to change that. We just have to come out and vote, not lose hope, continue our patriotism, make sure that you take pride in the fact that you are a conservative Republican, and I promise the city will turn around. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, so I'm volunteering to be a poll watcher. I'm going door to door, I'm doing all the things. What happens to those ballots once they leave the polls and once they're checked? How do we help stop this damn fraud?
Yeah, so I think that there's definitely efforts of having more people get pushed into, in terms of Republicans get pushed into the poll sites, and also, day of people working the poll sites essentially. So I think that there has to be accountability from both sides, right? So I think that there's a huge push of monitoring, right? I mean, that has to be part of it. Right. But I think that when it comes to party leaders, like not necessarily the Brooklyn GOP, but the party leaders that are deploying people into the poll sites, there has to be accountability with people coming in, hiring the right people, making sure that you have people that are not going to kind of lackadaisically run the poll sites, right? There has to be a level of understanding and accountability that that the level of sharpness has to happen, because we've seen it too. There was a couple of poll sites where people were kind of they weren't really paying attention, right? So we need to change that.
But what happens after that? Let's say once it leaves the poll sites, where does it go? What happens to those? Who handles it after it leaves the poll sites?
Yeah, I'm not as privy to in terms of the specifics. I know that's a conversation that I have with a lot of the people that we deploy out initially, but I can ask to see what those initiatives are. Yeah, and we have a plan. It just I don't want to overstep, but I think that what part of our initiative is obviously we need to. We're paying very, very close attention to each individual poll site, but for the people once they move into the next process is what we're going to discuss. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what about the mail-in ballots?
Right. So to my understanding, so the mail-ins and the absentees, that was more or less a de Blasio thing, right? In terms of what he introduced. So the paper ballots and the absentee ballots, there's going to be a lot less partial absentee ballots. There's going to be more permanent absentee ballots. Meaning that people that, if you go overseas or something like that for an extended period of time, go ahead.
No, I mean more when it comes in, how do we know, how's it handled? Who opens it? Who's taking care? Who's throwing things?
Sure. Yeah, no, so to my understanding, and this is just from my experience, usually there's both a Republican representative and Democratic representative, and that sits at the table when that happens. So they're basically, we're tit for tatting, basically, we're checking each other's, and that's how it, I mean, could the process be better? Of course. I think that it needs to be revamped to a degree. I mean, not just statewide, but nationally.
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing what happened in Arizona and in other states as well.
Like, where does it stay until it's open? Is it in a lot safe? I mean,
Sure. Yeah. Usually, it's not just out in the open. A lot. Yeah. It's usually, in a safe area. It's not like kind of thrown all over the place. But
right, but
yeah. It's a process that needs to be revamped. Quite honestly, it needs to be improved. It needs to be revamped.
it should have been. I mean, coming up the election, I think Lee Zeldin has a very good chance of winning. If not for, the concern of the vote, the fraud.
Sure, of course.
Of
course.
I think he has a very good chance.
Yes.
He's probably.
Well, with the New York Post and other, I mean, and even some of the more liberal media outlets, admitting and reporting on the fact that he's about 3 or 4 points behind is a very good indication.
Yeah. No,
most of these would say, oh, he's 20 points out, he was getting blown out, or whatever the case may be.
No, that's what I'm saying. So it sends the Democrats into a tizzy where they're going to try to, they pull out all the stops.
Sure.
And that's the concern.
Yep.
Not that, people have to get out and vote, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
But the voter fraud is like, we're all questioning it like,
Sure.
people get frustrated. They don't want to vote because what for?
Right. Yeah, I mean, and even way beyond, myself and when I got involved. I mean, that's just, I think with Trump running and going into that whole process, I mean, he exposed a lot of what was going on from a fraudulent perspective. The process 100% needs to be revamped. Unfortunately, it's not going to take a year or 2 or 3. It's probably a process that has to get rolled out, not just citywide, statewide, and then kind of, throughout the other states. But to that point, I think because we identified that in other states, I would have to assume that the individuals that are accounting these ballots and the processes themselves, there's definitely a closer watch in terms of what's going on in this election cycle as opposed to what we've seen. But it does need to be revamped 100%. Absolutely.
In your district,
Yes.
That's a new drawn district?
Yes, it's a newly drawn district, yes.
Okay, and
So my district, the district I'm in now was, I believe, District 23, which is now called the new District 26. So, and again, there was gerrymandering of the maps too. I'm sure we've all seen that. So when Marty Golden was in basically effectively the seat that I'm running for now, it looked a lot different. We had all of Dyker Heights, we had all of Gravesend, we had all of, fairly red areas, whereas this time it's Bay Ridge, part of Dyker Heights, then goes pretty much straight up north. But it is a new seat. Yep.
Yeah, I think one of my friends was saying that, like, she lives on the dead end by 16th, that I think, like, her block, they're voting in 2-3 different, just from her block, they changed.
Yeah, they with the gerrymandering of the maps, they've kind of cookie cuttered. Like, for example, there is an area, so with Dyker Heights specifically, I have the golf course, and then it goes up to like the 13th, 14th Avenue. But then there's one block where basically on that block, one side of the street is me, the other side of the street is a completely different candidate. So it's quite crazy the way that they've gerrymandered the maps. And furthermore, even the new proposal for city council specifically, I was on I actually was part of the testifying committee where basically the committee was trying to split up Bay Ridge and Dyker Heights from city council, which in my opinion is completely wrong. Because those that know Bay Ridge and Dyker Heights, they by and large share a lot of the same issues. The community is very, very, very similar in terms of what we need to fix. So to separate Bay Ridge from Dyker Heights is absolutely absurd. But yeah, to your point, it is that they've cookie cuttered the maps. They've gerrymandered the maps. They effectively came in and now they had a third party that reassessed the maps, and we have what we have now. But the Democrats are going to certainly try to do whatever they can to make sure that the maps are advantageous for Democrats. But by and large, I think there's a push and pull to that too, because if you make one area or one district, let's just say very, very blue, out of default, there are going to be other areas that they can't gerrymander that will be red. So it's going to affect the way that things are and broken up. But I think that the way they cookie cutter it, Some seats will be more advantageous for Democrats, and then other seats will be left out of default more advantageous for Republicans.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This was concern to people though. Imagine what happens if grant money comes into the state, and where that grant money is going to, which a lot of people become concerned, because some people keep saying it goes to the landed pockets, some people say they're going to fix our streets or represent our state. It would become a concern with this. Imagine it's like let's say federal grant comes into the state, then the state have to use that when they have to deal with certain issues for the city and for the districts.
Right.
And a lot of people have a right to know where's that money coming from.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think that, in terms of the grant money, I mean, I think that there's a level of transparency that we don't have at the moment that we need to increase. We don't have that right now because, again, we're largely Democratic run, in the city at least. There has to be, whether it's legislation, whether it's bills, there has to be more transparency when it comes to the grants and where the money's going. I mean, prime example, with the Thrive money, right? I mean, there's zero transparency with Thrive NYC. And frankly, I know that Nicole Melitakis shared her philosophy on that as well, and other candidates that I talked to were, I would even go as far as demanding a financial and forensic audit of Thrive NYC. Again, there's zero transparency when it comes to that, but I think that there has to be either legislation or bills or something put forward where there's accountability and transparency when it comes to the grants.
I see.
Yeah.
So in order to do this, it's going to require a lot of Republican majority over the Assembly and the Senate.
To a degree. Yeah, it would require a lot of unity, between the Senate and Assembly. But I think that we're in a good position from a unity and a synergy perspective, where I think that there'd be more than a handful of Republicans to get on board with that, and even perhaps Democrats, because I think that some of the moderate Democrats that are still out there that still exist between state Assembly and the state Senate would also push for more transparency.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, any more questions from the audience? Okay. One more. Yeah.
Yep, sure.
Bail, is bail in the U.S. Constitution?
I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Bail,
Yeah.
is bail in the U.S. Constitution? Or is it state by state, county by county?
That's a good question. I believe it's state. I believe it's state to state. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it's state to state. Because each regulatory body for the individual state has different bail laws than one another. Like our bail laws are different than New Jersey, different than Delaware, different than Virginia. So I believe it's state. Yeah. Yep.
All right. Any more questions before we conclude?
Likewise, the DA for San Francisco, I believe, was recently recalled. Do we have that power in New York State to recall somebody like
You know,
Oh, Greg.
we do. Well, we do, and I believe the only one that has that power is unfortunately Governor Hochul, which for a fact she's not going to recall Alvin Bragg or any of these individuals. But when Lee Zeldin gets in, like he stated publicly, his first initiative is to fire Alvin Bragg.
Recall, firing, recall, tomato, but that's the goal.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, partly the issue also is, and I put a lot of blame on the DA's office and the judicial system failing to prosecute, because they've done a terrible job at prosecuting. We're seeing so many repeat offenders out on the street that are committing the same crimes, and it comes down to the DA's office and the judicial system.
Thank you.
Why don't we do anything about it? Why do they keep just letting them out? It's crazy.
Well, I think that, from a fundamental perspective, the NYPD is for backwater, no pun intended, they're literally handcuffed.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to, again, qualified immunity, cops are not willing, there's more risk for a NYPD officer to make an arrest in general. They don't want to and it's tough enough, between the low salary, between the pensions and everything like that. They don't want to risk that, right? So, it's become very, very tough for an NYPD officer on the beat cop to make necessary arrests because there's so much risk. On top of that, it's also demoralizing knowing the person you're arresting, you're going to see back out on the street in 4 hours.
Yeah.
So, with those two things, it's become we're in a very, very dangerous situation because the cops, yes, they're doing their job. We're seeing an uptick in crime. People are blaming it on the cops that they're not doing their job. They literally can't do their job based on bail reform and qualified immunity. Like myself, like-minded individuals like Lizelle and Nicole, we all want to reverse that process by, again, hiring more on-the-beat cops, bringing back broken windows, plainclothes policing,
Right.
and increasing the police budget. That's the only way we're going to see a
But
difference.
doesn't Hochul know, doesn't she see what's going on?
She-
She's like, she's blinded, like.
She's
She
part
knows
of a much bigger picture,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and a lot of that is a self-serving ideology. Likely with Adams, right? I mean, while he's out partying and
Yeah.
having a great time, our
He doesn't care.
constituents and his
Right.
constituents are suffering. So I think that unfortunately, when you get to that point, she's part of a much bigger machine. I'm sure she knows. I mean, look, it's evident,
Yeah.
right? People are hurting.
Yeah.
We weren't living the same life like we were 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. We're just not. We're all less safe. She knows it,
Yeah.
but she's, again, part of that larger machine.
Because I think she said she was gonna wait until January to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like,
It's also during an election cycle. She's
Yeah.
willing to say whatever she can to pump up those
Right.
numbers.
What
She said she's gonna lie so that
Yeah.
they'll keep voting for her.
Speaking of
Yeah.
her, she signed last year the Green New Deal bill for New
Yes.
York.
Oh, God.
Which means, you heard of California with the 2035?
Oh, that's-
Guess what? That already happened here.
But that's not.
Yes, it's coming to New York State. Enjoy your electric vehicles, everyone. By 2035, we'll all have to plug them in, because we have a wonderful electric grid system here.
Right.
And that's why my box blew out
Yeah.
in the basement and in Friday when the electric was lower during August. So now I have to spend $5,200 to replace the box, new wires,
But that could be
new circuit breakers and everything, right?
Crazy.
So by 2035, my question is,
Sure.
how
That could be
could we,
reversed.
how could we reverse this? It's already voted on. I think it's a suggestion, but it's not really a suggestion. They already voted on it.
Sure.
They could delay it. New governor could delay it, but we don't have the votes. We don't have the votes. We can't overturn it.
Can't it be
Is that true?
overturned?
No.
No?
It was voted on.
Yeah.
You need a nice state senate and a state assembly to go along with the plan. So what happens is everyone has to get into your gas-powered vehicles and drive the hell out of New York State when that time comes, because that's what's going to happen.
Not to mention the $65,000 price tag of some of these cars.
Yeah.
And and it is environmentally
Yes.
friendly, I must admit, because the lithium-ion batteries
Yeah.
are very good for the earth.
Which is
and
not.
They get up,
Yeah.
and it comes from where?
China.
China.
Utah, China. That's where it comes from. We're making China, our enemy, communist enemy, richer, okay? How stupid are we? We know what the Green New Deal is all about, communism,
Right.
okay? That's what it's all about. They want to control us and kill
But
capitalism.
if we have everyone in the state and the Senate and in the White House, can't we like reverse all
Yeah,
that?
in a
You know what I'm
wonderful
saying?
society, we could do that.
When we,
But we
when
would have
Trump
to-
gets in,
Yeah.
he could reverse all
That's a New
that.
York State issue.
It's a state issue.
Oh,
State
okay.
issue, yeah.
So he wouldn't have anything to do with
Unless something on the
that?
federal level, there's a way of whatever. Maybe they
You gotta
can.
get-
He would have certain appointees that he could put in place, but
To
by and large,
change it,
yeah,
right?
by and
Well,
large,
that would
it's
be
a state
great,
issue.
yeah.
Effectively, really what it means is electing more Republicans
Right,
into
yeah.
the Senate and Assembly. These are the people like myself that will have absolutely nothing to do with the Green New Deal.
Yeah, the same thing like in California, Neeson was saying about everybody has to raise their air conditioners to 78. Ooh, it's kind of cold in here.
Right, right.
And, everybody has to chip in. And then he said, oh, and another thing, you can't plug in your electric cars. So the fire department was saying, you need to plug in your
These things are
cars.
spaced out too, I think. It's like,
Yeah.
like 30 or 40 miles or so, I think.
Because they have a lot of
Right,
wildfires
yeah,
and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
God forbid there's a fire, there's no way
You know
you'll
what?
end up dying.
Do you know what they call 78-degree air conditioning?
Yeah, what?
Heating.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's a good
He
point.
says, and he's wearing like a winter coat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
he's
said
shaking his
tomorrow.
gums.
Yeah. And then what they had on the news, on Fox News, one guy had a Tesla.
Yep.
He says, I can't use the Tesla, the car is no good, and the battery is dead, because I have
Great
no
in
car.
the wintertime.
So, and it's horrible in the wintertime
Yep.
because they die on
Well,
you.
batteries traditionally
Yeah.
get drained
Because they get,
more
like,
during
too
that
cold
winter
from the-
time.
yeah.
And to replace a lithium-ion battery
It's like
costs
40,000?
10 with the, like 10,000 or more.
Who has that
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
money?
yeah.
It's
Nobody
ridiculous.
has that kind of
So,
money.
any questions before we conclude? Brad?
You were
Another-
amazing.
yes.
God bless
Thank you.
you.
No, I really appreciate it.
I
Thank
hope
you so
that you
much.
get in.